What happened when the undercover CEO of a major financial corporation decided to go incognito and see the truth behind the scenes? He uncovered a web of corruption, unethical sales tactics, and a toxic workplace culture. Employees were overworked, customers misled, and profits came at the expense of integrity. This is the shocking story of how Ethan Caldwell went undercover in his own company to expose the truth and take action. Stay with us as we explore how one CEO's decision to step into his employees' shoes changed everything for the better. Ethan Caldwell had built Orion Financial Group from the ground up, turning it into one of the nation's most successful investment and loan corporations. With thousands of employees and branches across the country, he prided himself on running a company that prioritized both customer trust and employee well-being. But lately, something felt off. Reports from one of Orion's busiest regional offices painted a picture of smooth operations, but whispers of high employee turnover, customer dissatisfaction, and unethical sales practices kept surfacing. Clients were losing money on misleading investment plans, and employees were quitting under mysterious circumstances. Ethan had built his career on trusting data, but this time numbers alone weren't enough. His instincts told him that somewhere along the corporate chain, something was being hidden. To find out the truth, he made an unprecedented decision. He would go undercover as a new hire at the branch. Under the alias Evan Carter, a fresh-faced financial advisor trainee, he would blend in and experience the day-to-day struggles of his employees. With a subtle disguise, glasses, a trimmed beard, and business-casual attire, he prepared himself for what lay ahead. He wouldn't just be watching from the sidelines, he would be living the reality his employees faced every day. He wanted to see firsthand why customers were furious, why employees were quitting, and most importantly, who was responsible. As he walked through the doors of Orion's regional office, he had no idea just how deep the corruption ran. But by the time he left, he knew one thing for certain: everything was about to change. Ethan stepped into Orion Financial's regional office, taking in the sleek, glass-walled interior. On the surface, it looked like any other modern financial firm: polished floors, well-dressed employees, and a steady hum of ringing phones. But beneath the professional veneer, there was an unmistakable tension in the air. Employees kept their heads down, working at a frantic pace, barely looking up as he walked past. Conversations were hushed, but the frustration was evident. Whispers about impossible sales quotas, complaints about unapproachable management, and the unmistakable exhaustion on their faces. Within minutes of arriving, Ethan was introduced to Bryce Whitman, the branch manager. Bryce greeted him with a forced smile and a firm handshake, but there was little warmth in his eyes. Instead of the usual welcome aboard speech, Bryce immediately launched into expectations and quotas, handing Ethan a thick binder filled with aggressive sales targets. "We're in the business of making money, not babysitting clients," Bryce stated bluntly. "Your job is to push products, close deals, and hit your numbers, no excuses." Ethan nodded, hiding his discomfort at how transactional the business had become. He was assigned to shadow Olivia, a seasoned financial advisor, who greeted him with a tired but genuine smile. As they sat down at her desk, Ethan noticed the stress lines on her face, a sign of long hours and mounting pressure. "This job used to be about helping people," Olivia murmured as she skimmed through a stack of client portfolios. "Now, it's about pushing loans and investments, whether people need them or not." She pointed at her screen, where a list of daily call quotas blinked in red. 50 calls a day, 5 loan signings minimum, and if you don't meet your numbers, you get a warning. As the day progressed, Ethan watched as employees scrambled to meet their quotas, many pushing unnecessary financial products on customers just to stay afloat. He overheard a young advisor nervously pitching a high-risk investment plan to an elderly client, clearly uncomfortable with what he was doing. But with Bryce lurking nearby, there was no room for hesitation. Ethan's unease deepened. This wasn't just an overworked team, it was a pressure cooker environment, designed to squeeze every possible dollar from clients, no matter the cost. By the time his first day ended, one thing was clear: this wasn't about helping people build financial security. This was a machine built to prioritize sales over ethics, and its employees were merely cogs, forced to choose between their conscience and their paycheck. Ethan knew he had to dig deeper, because if this was happening on day one, the real problems were just beginning. At lunchtime, Ethan followed Olivia to the small break room, a cramped space with a flickering fluorescent light and a vending machine stocked with overpriced snacks. It was a stark contrast to the elegant client lounge, where high-net-worth customers were offered complimentary espressos and gourmet treats. Employees huddled around tiny tables, their voices low but filled with frustration. Olivia gestured for Ethan to sit as she peeled open a protein bar. "Welcome to the only 15 minutes of sanity we get all day," she muttered. Across from them sat Ben, a senior loan officer, who was rubbing his temples while scrolling through his tablet. "Another declined mortgage application," he sighed. "Guy barely qualifies, but management wants me to approve it anyway. If I do, he'll default within a year. If I don't, I get called into Bryce's office for not being a team player." He glanced up at Ethan. "Have you ever been forced to screw someone over just to keep your job?" Ethan hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Not yet," he admitted, though his stomach churned at the thought. Rachel, a customer service rep, dropped into a chair beside them, tossing her headset onto the table with an exasperated sigh. "I just spent 20 minutes talking to a guy who got slapped with hidden overdraft fees, and guess what? I'm not allowed to reverse them," she grumbled. "Company policy says all complaints must be escalated, but you know what that really means? Stalling until they give up and stop calling." She grabbed a lukewarm cup of coffee and took a bitter sip. "I hate lying to people. But if I don't, I get flagged for low efficiency. It's a lose-lose game." Ethan was starting to understand the depth of the problem. It wasn't just about exhaustion or difficult customers. The company had created a system where employees were forced to act against their morals just to survive. "I had a guy come in last week," Olivia continued, her voice tight with frustration. "He wanted a small business loan, just enough to keep his shop running, good credit, steady revenue, but management told me to push a higher interest loan with extra fees because it met our monthly targets better. I wanted to help him, but if I didn't follow orders, I'd be on probation." Ethan clenched his jaw, barely able to keep his frustration in check. This wasn't an issue of lazy employees or inefficiency. This was systematic greed, designed to benefit Orion's bottom line at the expense of both workers and customers. Just then, the door swung open and Bryce leaned in, scanning the room. "Lunch is over in 5. Back to work," he announced before disappearing. The conversation died instantly. Employees drained their coffee, forced a smile, and trudged back to their desks. Olivia sighed as she stood. "See? They don't even give us enough time to complain properly." Ethan exhaled, already feeling the weight of what he had uncovered, and knowing that he had only scratched the surface. Ethan sat beside Olivia at her desk, watching as she prepared for her next appointment. The client, Mr. Simmons, was a small business owner struggling to keep his shop afloat after a slow quarter. He had applied for a modest loan, hoping to cover rent and payroll for the next few months. When he arrived, his worry was evident: creased forehead, tired eyes, fingers tapping anxiously against his knee. "Mr. Simmons," Olivia greeted him with a professional but sympathetic smile. "I've reviewed your request, and we have some options for you." Ethan glanced at the file in front of her. His business had solid revenue but cash flow fluctuations. A reasonable loan would help him stay afloat, but the numbers Bryce had marked in red on the page suggested something else entirely. "As per our policy," Olivia continued, reading from a script, "we recommend a premium business expansion package instead of a standard loan. It gives you a higher credit line and extra financial flexibility." She paused, swallowing hard before adding, "There is a mandatory processing fee and a higher interest rate, but it'll allow you to grow long-term." Mr. Simmons blinked, confusion spreading across his face. "Wait," he said slowly. "I don't need expansion credit. I just need short-term working capital. That's way more than I can afford." Ethan watched as Olivia hesitated, clearly torn. Before she could answer, Bryce suddenly appeared behind them, clapping a hand on Olivia's shoulder. "Mr. Simmons, this is a great opportunity," Bryce said smoothly, his grin as artificial as the office decor. "Our premium clients see big returns when they invest in expansion. If you want to stay competitive, you'll need more than just a basic loan." Mr. Simmons' jaw tightened. "I just need what I applied for," he repeated firmly. Bryce's smile didn't waver, but his grip on Olivia's shoulder did. "Let's discuss after the meeting," he told her before walking away. Olivia looked down, her fingers tensing against the desk, then forced herself to continue. "If you're sure," she said softly, "we'll process your original request." After Mr. Simmons left, Ethan leaned in. "How often does that happen?" Olivia exhaled sharply. "Every day?" Ethan clenched his jaw. Orion Financial wasn't just pushing bad products. They were deliberately trapping struggling clients into long-term debt. And the worst part? Employees like Olivia had no choice but to play along. The tension in the office had been simmering for days, but it finally boiled over when an elderly man, Mr. Harris, stormed into the branch, gripping a crumpled stack of statements in his trembling hands. His face was flushed with frustration as he marched past the reception desk, ignoring the startled looks from employees. "I need to speak to someone now," he demanded, his voice carrying across the room. Rachel, the customer service rep, hurried over, her headset still around her neck. "Sir, let's take a seat and discuss the issue," she said, keeping her voice calm. Mr. Harris shook his head, waving the papers in the air. "I've been coming here for 3 weeks trying to get my money back. You people told me this investment plan would secure my retirement. Now I'm down nearly 20 grand in hidden fees. Every time I call, I get a different excuse. I want my money back." Employees around the office stopped what they were doing, stealing nervous glances toward the confrontation. Ethan, standing near Olivia's desk, watched as Rachel pulled up Mr. Harris's account. He could already guess what had happened. He had likely been pushed into a high-fee annuity or an aggressive stock portfolio without full disclosure of the risks. Rachel's expression tightened as she scanned the screen. "Sir, I see your account here, but I'm afraid the terms of your investment—" "I was lied to," Mr. Harris interrupted, his voice shaking. "The advisor never told me I'd be locked into fees for withdrawing early. I need this money to pay my medical bills." Before Rachel could respond, Bryce appeared, stepping between them with his usual smug confidence. "Mr. Harris, let's take this conversation to my office," he said, flashing a well-rehearsed corporate smile. But Mr. Harris wasn't having it. "No, I don't want another runaround. I want my damn money." The anger in the room was contagious. Ethan saw customers shifting uncomfortably, employees looking away as if they knew how this would end. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened, but it was the first time someone had made a scene. Ethan clenched his fists. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the undeniable proof that Orion was actively exploiting vulnerable clients. Before Bryce could make another excuse, Ethan stepped forward, his voice firm but controlled. "Mr. Harris," he said, "I believe you, and I'll make sure you get the resolution you deserve." Bryce whipped around, eyes narrowing. "Excuse me, Carter, but this isn't your—" "It is now," Ethan said, his patience officially gone. It was time to stop observing, it was time to act. That night, long after the office had emptied out, Ethan remained at his desk, scrawling through internal reports on his computer. The confrontation with Mr. Harris had been a turning point, proof that Orion wasn't just making bad business decisions, but deliberately trapping clients in financial ruin. If he was going to fix this, he needed hard evidence. His fingers moved quickly as he accessed internal memos and performance logs, searching for patterns. What he found was worse than he expected. Employees who refused to upsell risky financial products were quietly given low performance ratings. Customer complaints about hidden fees and predatory loans were marked as resolved, without action. The branch's success reports had been heavily doctored, making it seem like profits were rising due to strong investments, when in reality they were fueled by unethical sales tactics. Just as he was about to log out, a notification popped up. A scheduled quarterly compliance audit had been postponed 3 times in a row. That was it, the clearest red flag yet. Orion wasn't just ignoring complaints, it was actively covering them up. "Find something interesting," a voice said behind him. Ethan turned sharply to see Mark, the IT technician, leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. He was in his late 30s, with the look of someone who had seen too much and said too little. "Depends," Ethan replied, carefully. Mark smirked. "Depends if you want to keep your job, right?" He walked over and tapped the screen. Don't bother looking for audit records. The higher-ups delete anything that makes the corporation look bad. Ethan studied him. Well, why are you telling me this? Mark sighed. Because I'm tired of watching good people get screwed. I've seen advisors fired for telling clients the truth. I've seen customer complaints buried so deep they never reach corporate. And you know what happens to people who push back? He leaned in. They disappear. Either they quit, get demoted, or get forced out quietly. Ethan's stomach tightened. This wasn't just a case of one bad manager. This was systemic corruption, going all the way up the chain. As Mark walked away, Ethan closed his laptop and exhaled slowly. He had seen enough. Tomorrow, everything will change. The next morning, Ethan didn't bother with his disguise. He walked into Orion Financial's regional office in a tailored suit, his usual commanding presence restored. Employees froze mid-conversation, eyes widening in shock as they recognized him. Whispers spread like wildfire. The CEO was here. Olivia, Ben, and Rachel looked stunned, while Bryce, standing near his office, went rigid. "Morning, everyone," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. "Let's have a meeting, now." The conference room was silent as the branch's senior staff gathered. Bryce took his seat at the head of the table, still trying to mask his growing panic with fake confidence. "Mr. Caldwell, this is an unexpected visit," he said, forcing a smile. "If I had known, I would have prepared." Ethan cut him off. "No need for preparation, Bryce. I've already seen everything I need to see." He tossed a stack of printed reports onto the table. Falsified performance data, ignored customer complaints, employees being pressured to push high-risk financial products on vulnerable clients. "Want me to keep going?" The room tensed. Some employees shifted uncomfortably, while others, like Olivia and Ben, looked relieved that someone was finally addressing the truth. Bryce let out a nervous chuckle. "Ethan, Mr. Caldwell, there's a lot of nuance here. We've had to make tough financial decisions to keep up with industry standards." Ethan leaned forward, his expression cold. "Don't insult me, Bryce. This isn't about tough financial decisions. This is fraud, manipulation, exploitation. I've spent the last week undercover, speaking with customers and employees, hearing firsthand how you've turned this branch into a pressure cooker of greed and deception." Bryce's face paled. I was just following corporate directives." Ethan shook his head. "No. Orion Financial has policies in place to help customers succeed, not trap them in debt. You and your team ignored those policies to inflate your numbers and protect your bonuses." He turned to the other department heads. "And I don't need to ask how many of you knew about it." The silence was suffocating. Ethan exhaled sharply. "Effective immediately, Bryce. You're fired. And not just fired. Your actions are being reported to corporate compliance and legal teams. You won't just lose your job. You'll never work in this industry again." Bryce stammered, his hands trembling as he scrambled for words. "Ethan, please?" Ethan didn't flinch. "Get out." As security escorted Bryce out of the building, Ethan turned back to the remaining managers. "For the rest of you, things are going to change. Starting today." A long pause. Then, for the first time since Ethan had arrived, employees in the room exhaled in relief. With Bryce gone, the tension in the room shifted from fear to anticipation. Employees who had spent years feeling powerless now sat upright, waiting to hear what came next. Ethan took a steady breath, knowing that firing one corrupt manager wasn't enough. He needed to rebuild trust from the ground up. "Here's what's going to happen," he began, locking eyes with each manager in the room. "First, we're eliminating unethical sales quotas. No more pressuring customers into high-risk loans or investments just to hit numbers. Our job is to provide real financial solutions, not manipulate people into debt." A few employees exchanged shocked glances. This was a complete reversal of everything they'd been forced to do for years. "Second," Ethan continued, "we're launching a new employee support initiative. That means fair compensation, better work-life balance, and direct access to corporate leadership when issues arise. If you're struggling, you'll be heard. No more being ignored." Rachel, the customer service rep, let out a breath of relief, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Third, Ethan said, any customer who has been misled by predatory policies, like Mr. Harris and Sarah, will be compensated. I'm assembling a team to review past complaints, and we will make things right. Ben, the senior loan officer, nodded approvingly. It's about time, he muttered. Ethan looked around the room, reading the expressions on his employees' faces. He saw skepticism, hope, and disbelief. They had heard promises before, but this time, for the first time in years, it felt real. This isn't just about fixing this branch, Ethan said firmly. This is about fixing Orion Financial from the inside out. We're going back to what banking should be, about trust, not just profit. A slow ripple of nods and quiet agreement spread through the room. The change wouldn't happen overnight, but this was the first step, and for the first time in a long time, the employees of Orion Financial felt like they were working for something bigger than just numbers on a spreadsheet. A month later, Ethan walked back into the Orion Financial regional office, but this time, the energy in the room was completely different. The usual tension had been replaced with a quiet confidence, and for the first time since he had stepped through these doors undercover, he saw something unexpected. Genuine smiles. Employees moved with purpose, not panic, and the desperate rush to meet impossible quotas was gone. He stopped by the customer service desk, where Rachel was assisting an elderly woman with a clear, patient explanation of her investment options. There was no forced upselling, no hidden fees, just honest financial guidance. When she noticed Ethan, she gave him a knowing nod. "It's actually nice helping people again," she said with a small smile. Next, he checked in with Ben, the loan officer, who was approving loans based on what clients actually needed, not what would maximize corporate profits. "Feels weird not being forced to push bad deals," Ben admitted, "but I'll take it." In the advisors section, Olivia was reviewing financial plans for a young couple. When she looked up and saw Ethan, she didn't hesitate to approach him. "You actually did it," she said, crossing her arms. "I won't lie. I thought you were just another executive making empty promises." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "You weren't wrong to doubt me," he admitted, "but I meant what I said. This place needed change, and we're just getting started." Beyond this branch, the entire company was shifting. The toxic sales culture was being dismantled, and corporations had started reevaluating every branch's performance metrics to focus on long-term customer relationships instead of quick profit grabs. As Ethan stepped outside, he looked up at the Orion Financial logo on the glass doors. This wasn't just about one branch or one scandal. It was about redefining what his company stood for. Somewhere along the way, Orion had lost sight of its mission, but now it was back on course. For the first time in a long time, Ethan wasn't just proud of the company he had built, he was proud of what it was becoming. The story of Ethan Caldwell's undercover experience reveals a powerful lesson about leadership, ethics, and accountability. As a CEO, Ethan had trusted corporate reports and performance metrics, believing that his company was operating smoothly. However, by stepping into the daily struggles of his employees and customers, he uncovered systemic corruption, unethical sales tactics, and a toxic work culture that had been hidden behind polished numbers. The biggest lesson learned is that true leadership requires direct involvement. It's not enough to manage from the top. Leaders must understand the real challenges faced by their employees and customers. Ethan's experience also highlights the importance of ethical business practices. When companies prioritize profit over people, they eventually erode trust, hurt employees, and damage their own long-term success. By taking action, firing corrupt leaders, changing policies, and rebuilding trust, Ethan proves that change is possible when leaders are willing to listen and act decisively. The story reminds us that a business's success is not just measured by revenue, but by the integrity with which it operates. Ethical leadership not only benefits employees and customers, it strengthens the company as a whole.